God of the gaps? Seriously? I should have known. All too often, scratch a space enthusiast and you find a stone-cold atheist underneath. Like Gene Roddenberry, creators of Star Trek. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is another Declaration of Truth from your host, Terry A. Hurlbut. 2 days ago, YouTube influencer Jordan, the Angry Astronaut, Wright, revealed something I confess I never saw coming as long as I've been watching his channel, which is he is a stone-cold atheist. In an installment about alien civilizations, he specifically denied God by denying the Genesis flood. He said that to say that God was as outrageous a concept as are Kardashev's megastructured civilizational types. He even used the expression God of the gaps, which is a childish or at least high school level insult. And now I'm going to straighten him out. And stick with me to the end where I challenge him to a debate. Here you're going to hear it all. From Nikolai Kardashev's Type 1 and Type 1, Type 2, and Type 3 civilizations to Walter T. Brown's hydroplate theory of the global flood. I'm going to lay it on the line. But first, I do want to shout out to the prime sponsor of this channel, which is Conservative News and Views. Link in the description. Be sure to check out the awesome CNAV Store. Scroll down near the bottom for that link. Lots of great merchandise there, especially this t-shirt that I have chosen for today, which depicts the greatest ship in the annals of naval architecture, the life ship of Noah, miscalled Ark because Athanasius Kircher conceived it as having the characteristics of a large rectilinear chest, and quotes Noah, the greatest shipwright of them all, as saying, "Sometimes faith will make you look stupid until it rains." I'm not going to talk about the life ship, not today, but I will talk about the event that made the life ship necessary. One more thing. If you like what you're about to hear, you can like this video. You can also click the bell icon to get a notice every time I come out with a new one. In fact, do you see the new icon, the heart shape with the US dollar sign in it? That's the super thanks icon. If you really want to keep these videos coming, click that and leave me a tip. Any currency will do, so long as it's legal tender. Now, all right, first, who is the Angry Astronaut? The Angry Astronaut is the name of a channel operated by a gentleman named Jordan Wright. He normally talks about various space programs, the history of space flight, and the often silly decisions that have not only an opportunity cost, but pose a very real risk to human society. To cite the best example, he expresses understandable and proper concern about space junk. No wonder he gets angry, and with that kind of anger, I sympathize. But lately, he has gone off on tangents involving interstellar travel and extrasolar civilization. This is what prompted me to address some of the original proposals for interstellar travel and multistellar civilization going back to the 50s and 60s and 70s. Then, on March 20th, Mr. Wright left this episode titled, and I kid you not, Alien Death Star Megastructures Discovered, The Strange Case of HD 139139. I have a link in the description to the video. Now, I will not discuss here the particulars of the star HD 139139. Instead, I will focus on one persistent accusation that he has already received. Why assume that extraterrestrials are powerful enough as a civilization to do godlike things like dimming a star? He retorted that his detractors accused him of creating aliens of the gaps. So he accused them, and more properly, me, as a Christian, of creating a god of the gaps. He cited the Noahic flood as, in his mind, the booby prize example. The flood could never have occurred because not enough water exists on Earth to drown the great mountain chains. That would be especially true of the Himalayas, the tallest mountains in the world that include Everest. Therefore, there was no flood, so there was no God. So let's talk about how aliens could be as powerful as he says. Extraterrestrial civilizations have, since their invention, been God substitutes or devil substitutes. Well, maybe not the Star Trek franchise, because Gene Roddenberry often reversed the roles, making humans and their allies the visitors to backward planets. But every other franchise, yes indeed, in using the phrase Death Star, Wright proposed that HD 139139 might host a hostile and dangerous civilization. If you want to see what he means, check out the Disney sequel trilogy of Star Wars. Again, never mind that some of us think that that trilogy killed the franchise. Just think about Starkiller Base and how it operates, and I'll come back to that. In fact, the Russian astronomer Nikolai Kardashev in 1964 proposed a scale for measuring the power of a civilization by the amount of energy it could capture and use. I have a link in the description to his original paper, courtesy of Harvard University and the Wayback Machine. His scale proposed 3 types of civilization. Type 1 can harness all the energy that strikes its home world from its primary star. Just the home world. Type 2 can harness all the energy its star puts out, which would render the star invisible to outsiders. And Type 3 can harness the total energy output of a galaxy. I have a link in the description to a video explaining the 3 types. We don't even come close to that scale. The Star Trek franchise, in 1 episode, featured the finding of a Type 2 civilization, the builders of a Dyson sphere. Head scratch alert, what kind of sphere? A Dyson sphere. Mr. Freeman Dyson proposed building a shell to envelop the sun and suggested that people live on its inner surface. Other visionary engineers have proposed a swarm of ships in very precise orbits around the sun that barely avoid colliding, and no one ever travels or ships anything between any 2 of them. Jordan Wright seized upon the Dyson swarm concept to explain a dimmed star. In a recent video, he really said, there, you see? Someone's built a Dyson swarm and put in the last element, or words to that effect. Now, is all that really that difficult to imagine? Yes. Jordan Wright, in other installments, has blithely assumed that photovoltaic solar panels will always collect the energy to replace themselves. Other influencers have made the same mistake. Well, it's time for me to bring the bucket of cold water. I have recently seen some very concerning numbers that the solar lobby consistently denies. Let's look at all the ways you spend energy and see whether a solar panel can ever yield that much over its lifetime. In order, you have to extract the raw materials for solar panels out of the ground, fashion the panels, transport them to job sites, install them, take them down when sooner or later they become less efficient with repeated use, i.e. sun exposure, transport them to a reprocessing center, break them down to their component substances, and then refashion them and reinsert them into the cycle. We're not doing anything beyond the takedown. Instead, we are shipping spent solar panels to poor countries who are throwing them into landfills. I've seen the numbers, and they tell me that a solar roof will yield even less energy than it takes to make the panels, especially when you include mining them. And right now, reprocessing still costs more than mining and refining. And not one person in the solar industry is even thinking about the problem. Well, maybe Elon Musk is, or if not, he'd better. I invite him to leave a comment. I invite anyone in the solar industry to leave a comment. And that's allowing for the link I have in the description that speculates on Musk's role in turning Earth into a Kardashev Type One civilization. And speaking of, even Nikolai Kardashev could not have imagined this insurmountable obstacle to any civilization even reaching his Type 1 level. Then again, his masters in the Communist Party of the Soviet Union would never have listened. So much for Nikolai Kardashev. Now we talk about God. Is God a God of the gaps? Or did the Noahic flood occur exactly as Moses, quoting Noah and his sons, said it did? Well, for answer, start with In the Beginning, Compelling Evidence for Creation and the Flood by Walter T. Brown, Ph.D. I have a link in the description to where you can read the entire book online. Regular readers will remember CNAV's collaboration with Brown in a key regard, fixing the date of the global flood with an astronomical anchor. I have links in the description to 3 articles I wrote on that subject with Dr. Brown's collaboration. Very briefly, while I calculated 24 different candidate dates for the global flood, back calculating from the destruction of the Jewish temple in Jerusalem in 586 BC by Nebuchadnezzar the Great, Dr. Brown was doing a regression analysis on the orbits of 5 to 7 cometary objects, asking himself in what year were they most likely to be all at perihelion at the same time. He came up with a date of 3344 BC. And yes, that's BC, not BCE. The great epoch is Christ, not your common era. But I digress. Anyway, that turned out to be my calculated date, assuming Archbishop Usher's chronology of the Hebrew gates, sorry Edwin Arthiel, a long sojourn in Egypt, a late birth of Abraham in relation to his father, and dates from the Septuagint for the descendants of Shem from Arpachshad to Terah, father of Abraham. Those articles I mentioned will tell you what I am talking about. But long before Walt Brown even got to that point, Brown observed the continued stratification of the Rocky Mountain chain, and especially the elaborate strata of the Grand Canyon. He concluded that the layers of the geological column, cannibals always often invite the devout Catholic priest to join casseroles, tuna, or quail, consisted of ancient silt. That applied even to the Rockies despite their elevation. In simplest terms, his hydroplate theory of the global flood works out this way. God created the earth with a subcrustal ocean about 3/4 of a mile deep and located 60 to 100 miles underground. A system of pillars kept this ocean from collapsing, but the earth's crust, subject to tidal stress from the moon, pumped this ocean and made it supercritically hot. How hot is that? So hot that the water meniscus between liquid and water vapor vanished, and liquid and vapor mixed totally. For you thermodynamics professors out there, you get a supercritical fluid by heating a fluid hotter than its critical temperature and by applying more than the critical pressure. Under such conditions, instead of dry steam, you get supercritical water, to give the salient example. Well, one day, one of those pillars cracked and crumbled. Why? Accident? Industrial carelessness? We can speculate endlessly on that because the technology of antediluvian civilization could have vastly exceeded ours. Do not assume that pre-flood technology had any higher limit. However, the loss of that pillar happened. The tidal forces exacerbated the stress on the crust itself. And then, in the year 3344 BC, the crust cracked. That crack persists today as the mid-oceanic ridge system. Now, I'm going to let you hang right there because I want to shout out to a sponsor who can really help you through the economic storms to come. That sponsor is oursilverlines.com. Do you feel like you're working harder for your money just to get by? You are not alone. The fluctuating economy, the employment issues, unexpected changes in life have left many families struggling over the past few years. Collecting gold and silver can help shield you against many of these challenges. But if you're like me many years ago, you don't know where or how to start. Our Silver Lines helps by connecting you with thousands of members who are learning the secrets to creating and protecting true wealth by collecting precious metals. Whether you just want to collect rare and unique coins or take advantage of the business opportunities this company provides. Either way, they can help you learn to live an exceptional life. Visit oursilverlines.com to learn how you can build a legacy for your future. Yes, so as I said, the cracks persist as the mid-Atlantic and southwest Indian and other ridge systems. The geologists were right in observing that the Earth's continents fit together like a vast jigsaw puzzle. They call this puzzle Pangea. The crack in the world, apologies to the producers of the 1965 motion picture of that name, let mega hogsheads of supercritically hot water escape from the fountains of the deep as far as 32 times the speed of sound. Someone made an excellent video, 6 minutes long, simulating that. Dr. Brown embedded it on his site, and I have the link. The crustal edges flooded, same as paper in an electric fan slipstream might. This created magnitude 10 to 12 earthquakes, of which every earthquake since then has been an aftershock. These earthquakes, acting on buried quartz, turned the crust into the biggest nuclear reactor the world has ever seen. This is the source of radioactivity on Earth and elsewhere in the solar system, and isotopes light and heavy of the original chemical elements. As much as 5% of the Earth's mass escaped beginning on that day as water, rock, and mud. This persists today as the mavericks of the solar system, meteoroids, comets, asteroids, and trans-Neptunian objects, and especially Pluto, whose carbon monoxide lake in Tombau Regio could have formed only from the burning of trapped trees from Earth's forests and jungles. And no, Jan Oort, we have never seen your cloud. You assume facts not in evidence. Your facts have never been in evidence. And here we have the source of the astronomical fix. The year 3344 BC is the most likely year for all the comets to have been at perihelion at once. They weren't at perihelion. They launched in that year. The event caused the ridges to upwell and the Pacific Basin to collapse like a stove-in ping-pong ball. The upwelling mid-Atlantic ridge shoved the Americas to the west. When the Americas came crashing down to the floor of the old subcrustal chamber, the Great Divide bunched up like a wrinkle in a bedsheet. North America, broad as it is, got an eastern wrinkle, the Appalachian mountain chain. Notice that every mountain chain but two is oriented roughly north to south. And that's why. What are the two oriented in other directions? They are the Pyrenees, where Iberia slammed into Europe and grafted itself on, and the Himalayas, where Africa, Europe, and Asia collided. And we can explain the Apennines by supposing that another upheaval made Italy's boot draw eastward for a kick and then freeze. Sicily is the football waiting for Italy to kick it. Every mountain chain that rose up then sank. And east of each chain, except the Apennines in Italy, land hydraulically moved up to form a plateau. In France, you got the Massif Central, the Cévennes. Now, the Tibetan Plateau, together with the Himalayas, form a mass so heavy that it threw the Earth off balance. Now, I can show you. This is a very old Rand McNally World Portrait Globe, and I have remounted it at the original poles as Walt Brown has calculated them. Now, look at it. Originally, Mongolia was Arctica, and the Himalayas and the Tibetan Plateau, here they are. They're within the Arctic Circle, but they're not at the North Pole. Modern Antarctica, look, it's temperate. And the Antarctic region, it's an ocean. And the USA and Canada, they're tropical. But the Earth rolled to its present orientation to relieve the stresses from the Himalayas and the Tibetan Plateau being off-center, just enough. Result? Permafrost containing tropical jungles, frozen woolly mammoths, and an Arctic Ocean and a continent called Antarctica. Now comes the $1,024,000 question. Where did all the water go? the water drained into the Pacific Basin, which now holds most of it, and the new Atlantic Basin, which didn't exist before. I have a link in the description to Answers in Genesis video explaining where the water went. Notice also that the concentrations of deuterium in the oceans of Earth is half that in any comet. The comets came from the subcrustal ocean, which captured a tsunami of neutrons to form heavy hydrogen and radioactive hydrogen and heavy oxygen. The subcrustal waters diluted the original seas of Earth 1-to-1, or maybe the seas diluted the subcrustal waters, which is why the deuterium concentrations are what they are and why the comets could never have watered the Earth. And the Grand Canyon, well, that formed after the flood. Once North America had two more Great Lakes, called them Grand Lake and Hopi Lake, at different elevations. A check dam broke and drained the higher lake into the lower, and then another dam broke. All that water rushed out, carved the Colorado River right into the Gulf of California, and it carved the Grand Canyon. The Havasupai tribe remember it today as a combat of their gods. See, some of their ancestors were there. They were on the scene. Oral legends almost always begin with eyewitness accounts. So, what do you think of this God of the Gaps theory now? Where are now Jordan Wright's objections to a God of the Gaps? The flood need not have covered Mount Everest even while Everest was higher than an airliner flies. Everest did not exist. It formed in the great collision of three continents. And human beings could easily repopulate the Earth, even so in so short a time as the 5,300 years, give or take a century, that have passed since the flood. In fact, I have a link in the description to my own discussion of why it's no big deal for the Earth to be only 7,000 years old. They could repopulate if they did not suffer from the social problems that secularism, hedonism, and alternative lifestyleism have wrought. I have a link in the description to the site Ancestry.com, and full disclosure, I do not have any sponsorship agreement with them. They could easily tell you that families with 10 or more children were once normal. Furthermore, the object Oumuamua is not, as Wright insists, a solar sailboat that dived into our solar system and accelerated on its way out. It is a long-period comet that fell closer than some of the heavier scattered disk objects beyond Neptune. And if it did accelerate on its way out, it must have slingshotted away under the influence of some of those objects. Now, which is more fantastical? A God who warned a man to build a project that would make him the greatest shipwright in human history? Or an Emperor Palpatine or Dictator Snoke or Kylo Ren building a device that could wipe out human civilization in a trice? Which is more believable? An astronomical confluence that happens to accord with the best assumptions of the chronologies of Old Testament figures, especially their kings? Or a civilization that somehow solved the solar program budget problem to which we won't even admit? And therefore, I'm going to issue a challenge right now. I challenge the Angry Astronaut to a debate, the same as Bill Nye the Science Guy had with Ken Ham of Answers in Genesis. I have a link in the description to my review of the Bill Nye and Ken Ham debate. Perhaps Mr. Wright could give a better account of himself than Bill Nye gave of himself. The subject shall be resolved that the most viable theory of the origin and present condition of the earth favors Genesis chapters 1 through 11. In addition, I warn all who are trying to solve the problem of Earth through space exploration. The asteroid belt is not likely to hold any more valuable mineral resources in any great quantity than maybe these three. Deuterium in twice the concentrations of the oceans of Earth, tritium in even greater concentration than one can ever find on Earth, and tralfium, or helium-3, a substance the value of which most don't appreciate. Perhaps iron and nickel might prove valuable for construction, and bringing them to Earth would be better than letting it fall to Earth onto someone's house. but striking it rich because there's gold in them there asteroids or platinum? Forget about it. Absolutely no theory that anyone can construct that would predict such riches has any validity. The asteroids did not come from an exploded planet. They came from Earth. That and only that is why some asteroids pass near enough to threaten us, or get trapped in near-compatible orbits, like asteroid 3753 Cruithne, spelled Cruithen-Ne. Hey, it's a Welsh word, don't worry about it. But worry about this. If I ever get anything in the mail promising riches from the exploitation of the asteroid belt and asking me to invest based on finding literal gold or platinum, I'm going to rat out the sender to the United States Securities and Exchange Commission. I'm going to charge that person or those persons with fraud. Oh no, all our visions of riches are all wet. But cheer up, Mr. Wright. It's not so terrible as that. At least you don't have to believe in a civilization that will come here fighting a war of annihilation. Or worse, just collect all the energy of a star that doesn't need in an object as big as a planet and then shoot it out at us. That wasn't my idea. That was Kathleen Kennedy and J.J. Abrams' idea, and it ill befits anyone to take that seriously. Instead, you can believe in a God who loves you. And not only that, wants a relationship with you. Yes, you, me, anybody. King David of ancient Israel asked, "What is man that thou art mindful of him?" Psalm 8 verse 4. And the answer? Man is God's most exquisite and prized creation, as fouled up as we are. Now that might indeed be a God of the gaps, because frankly, none of us deserves his love. The only reason he hasn't pulled off another global flood is that he promised he wouldn't. More to the point, he sent his only begotten Son to die for us. Resurrection Sunday is coming up, and indeed we are now in the season of Lent. This is as good a time as any to remind us that God filled the greatest gap of all between himself and us. Now that's something no one else but him can fill. Links in the description to the article, to the Angry Astronaut's original video, to Nikolai Kardashev's original paper, to the video illustrating Kardashev's 3 types of civilization, to another video speculating on Earth-going Type One, to Walt Brown's online book, to my 3 articles about an astronomical date fix for the global flood, to the video concept of how the flood might have gone down, to the other video showing where the water went, to my discussion about Earth being 7,000 years old, to Ancestry.com, to my review of the Bill Nye and Ken Ham debate, to my Declarations of Truth Twitter account, and to Conservative News and Views. I've also left links to the awesome CNAV Store and to oursilverlines.com, as I also mentioned. You know already about how to like a video, turn on notifications, and leave a tip. On the end screen, I'm going to leave a subscribe link to my channel and links to the Angry Astronaut's Death Star video. The video describing Kardashev's 3 types, and the one simulating the global flood in hydroplate theory terms. This is Terry A. Hurlbut delivering another declaration of truth and reminding you to let the truth set you free.